she's a fan long ago. Happy to keep you busy.
Attention, the press briefing will begin in 2 minutes. The press briefing will begin in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Party time.
I just do this for yes. What if I do fast? Is he
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, a couple things. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This Saturday, our nation marked the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, a seminal moment in our history and in our work towards equal opportunity for all Americans. Sadly, this day of remembrance ended with yet more American communities wounded by an act of gun violence, including communities in Boston, Chicago, and Joppa. At least one shooting this weekend was reportedly fueled by hate and carried out with 2 firearms. On Saturday in Jacksonville, Florida, a white gunman went on a shooting rampage at a store near a historically black university and killed 3 black individuals. Even as we continue searching for answers, we must say clearly and forcefully that white supremacy has no place in America. As the president said in his statement yesterday, we must refuse to live in a country where black families going to the store or black students going to school live in fear of being gunned down because of the color of their skin. Hate must have no safe harbor. Silence is complicity, and we must not remain silent. And we must continue to do all we can to keep guns out of dangerous hands. The President and the First Lady are praying for the victims and their families, and this entire administration grieves with the people of Jacksonville. Earlier today, the President spoke to Governor DeSantis and told him he quickly approved the emergency declaration for Florida. The President also expressed the administration's full commitment and support to Florida. At the President's direction, FEMA has deployed 2 incident management teams to Tallahassee and has one in Atlanta ready to pivot as needed. The President continues to be briefed on the current trajectory of Tropical Storm Idalia, and the team here will continue to update him as the system progresses. Unfortunately, as you all know, Floridians are no strangers to these types of storms. It's important that people prepare today, get supplies, so they get food, water, and charge your electronic devices. People should visit ready.gov for tips on how to prepare. Lastly, if you are in the storm's path, please listen to your local and state officials for guidance on evacuations or any updates. As we just announced moments ago, President Biden will travel to Hanoi, Vietnam on September 10th, following his participation in the G20 summit in New Delhi. While in Hanoi, President Biden will meet with key leaders to discuss ways to deepen the cooperation between the United States and Vietnam. The leaders will explore opportunities to promote the growth of technology-focused and innovation-driven Vietnamese economy, expand our people-to-people ties through education exchanges and workforce development programs, combat climate change and increase peace, prosperity, and stability in the region. And on Monday, September 11th, the President, the Vice President, First Lady, and Second Gentleman will mark the 22nd anniversary of the terror attacks on September 11th, 2001. The President will travel from Hanoi to Alaska to participate in a memorial ceremony with members of the military and their families. The Vice President and the Second Gentleman will participate in a commemoration ceremony at the National September 11th Memorial and Museum in New York City, and the First Lady will lay a wreath at the National 9/11 Pentagon Memorial to honor the lives lost on September 11th. Today, the President and the First Lady visited students at Elliott Hine Middle School in Washington, D.C. to mark the start of the school year. This visit kicks off a number of back-to-school activities for the First Lady this week, as well as Secretary of Education Cardona will soon hit the road for a back-to-school bus tour. When President Biden took office, less than half of the kindergarten to 12 students were going to school in person. Thanks to his swift actions and historic investment, every school in America is open safely for in-person instruction. The administration remains committed to supporting schools and the students they serve. And today we are joined by the senior advisor and president to the President and Director of the Office of Public Engagements, Stephen Benjamin, who is here to discuss the present March on Washington commemoration engagements today. And the floor is yours, Mayor, if you're ready. This is also his first time in the briefing room, so welcome. Yeah, come on up. Come on up.
That means be nice to me.
Be nice to him, yes.
So today, the President and Vice President Harris will commemorate the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington. As you may have seen, the Washington Post op-ed penned by the President to commemorate the sacred day and outline how the Biden-Harris administration is working to fulfill Dr. King's dream of redeeming the promissory note of our nation. The President and Vice President will meet privately with organizers of the march, community leaders, and members of the King family shortly, in just about a half hour. This meeting will take place exactly 60 days after the initial Oval Office meeting between President Kennedy and Dr. King on the morning of the original March on Washington. Later this evening, President Biden will host a reception as well and provide remarks to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the founding of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have right now.
60 years today. 1963 was a pivotal year in civil rights. Medgar Evers was shot and killed in June of 63. The March on Washington in August of 63. 2 weeks later, 4 little girls were killed in a Baptist church. That was 60 years ago. Today, we are witnessing what's happened in Jacksonville. We've got laws in the books, policies, etc. What can this administration do to quell the hate that is on the rise that the FBI has quantified?
Sure. I would say this. The administration has, since day one, since the President signed his first executive order on making sure that everything we've done is focused on equity in this administration, and all of his work since then, including obviously another executive order signed on the anniversary of Bloody Sunday to make sure that the sacred right to the franchise is protected. It is sacrosanct in everything this administration does. Obviously, there's a full investigation going on in Jacksonville right now. We're going to let law enforcement authorities do their job. But everything in this administration is focused on making sure that we try to appeal to the better angels against, it seems, a rising tide of not only racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, violent attacks against our LGBT, our brothers and sisters, and even significant crimes against our AA and HPI community. That's why it's so important that we remain vigilant every single day from all aspects of the administration, a whole of government approach, recognizing that there's work yet to be done. It's important to note that while we're not where we want to be, we're certainly not where we used to be. The progress that has been made, not only in the Biden-Harris administration, which has had a number of historic firsts, I might add, but over the last 60 years, this country has come a long way. And we have to, I believe, people of goodwill have to lean in to that progress, but realize that we are on the front line against a rising tide of a lot of isms, and we've got to continue to push back together. That's embedded in the President's piece in the Washington Post. I encourage everyone to lean into it.
Follow up on that, if I could, real quick. There's a lot of racial rhetoric going on in this political campaigning atmosphere. Is there going to be, or am I making a reach in this question, will there be a reach across the aisle to say enough is enough, we've got to stop this? Because a lot of this, people are saying, are stemming from a lot of this rhetoric.
Sure, and I'd give a brief response to that. The President has endeavored, and I watch it in every engagement I have with him and every engagement he has with the public, to recognize the fact that he's the President of all of the United States of America. He speaks to people on both sides of the line, urban, rural, and suburban America, and he speaks again in a way that brings people together. That will continue to be his position as well as the Vice President's position. But yes, it requires the President, the Vice President, but all of us, again, to lean in and make sure we're working to pull people together and push back against that rhetoric that we do see, April. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Does the White House see any connection with the changes that the Florida governor has made in teaching about African American history to the kind of violence that we saw in Jacksonville?
The President has been very clear, again, in the piece he penned this morning, and I think probably more so in action, his actions last month, in working to establish the monuments to Emmett Till and maybe Till Mobley, of course, recognizing, commemorating the sad event of his murder, but also recognizing the courage of his mother in making sure that she helped light the fuse that set in action significant events of the civil rights movement. That action, establishing these monuments in Mississippi and in Illinois, was meant to make sure people understand that we cannot rewrite American history, that we have to tell the good with the bad, and that is edifying to the soul of this country in the present. Since day one, you've heard him talk about his personal reaction to Charlottesville. Redeeming the soul of America is central to who Joe Biden is as a man and why he chose to run for president as a candidate. So I don't think it's a stretch to suggest that trying to rewrite American history is not only wrong, but it also encourages our children and those among us not to lean in to the beautiful and also painful past of what our history looks like, and encouraging people to move forward together.
Thank you for the question. Looking at the op-ed today, a lot of the achievements that are listed in here obviously resonate, but have to do with the economy, lowering unemployment, health insurance, investing in small businesses. I'm wondering if the administration still believes that those achievements will resonate when you still have hate crimes happening across America. You still have Supreme Court decisions that have obviously led to setbacks in some of the more sweeping proposals by this administration, such as student loan relief or even affirmative action. When many people still feel that their civil liberties are being infringed upon, is the administration confident that some of these economic achievements will really resonate among Black Americans throughout?
Sure. Well, we certainly hope so. Not only in the context of electoral politics, but simply because it's the right thing to do. The president has been incredibly supportive of and hoping for passage of the John Lewis Act, encouraging we protect the sacred right to vote, and certainly even the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to make sure, of course, we've led from the front as it relates to federal authorities and chokeholds and the like. But we'd like much more support from Congress in moving these things forward. It is a difficult environment to move forward some legislation, but every single thing that we can do by executive order the president has been leaning on. There are a lot of challenges that people face, but we certainly believe that part of Dr. King's message and all the other amazing organizers of the March on Washington focused on the economy and jobs and freedom. So these amazing investments that have been made in Black businesses and minority-owned businesses, small businesses across this country, making sure people have access to health care, more people insured now than ever, $35 insulin, making sure that people don't have to make decisions between poverty and getting the medicine that they need, clean water, removing lead pipes from communities all across this country. I do believe that when the rubber hits the road, people will pay more attention to these dramatic investments in their quality of life and listen more closely to these important issues. But that's politics. I want to make sure we stay closely to the policies.
Is the administration still on track to do that in the next decade?
As far as I understand.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, the president said yesterday that he will speak to the people of Jacksonville. Does he have any plans to visit the city and to meet with folks? And has he spoken yet with any of the families of the victims of that shooting?
As of right now, the president has spoken to the mayor and to the sheriff. And obviously, as Karine mentioned, he had a separate conversation with the governor today. As of right now, I don't think there are any travel plans, but obviously that is always subject to change.
Has he reached out to the families of the victims, or does he have any plans to speak?
As far as I know, I think the victims are only identified as of this morning. So I don't believe that, but I can't speak to it with any facts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, students are going back to school around this time of the year. The president has talked about book bans. A lot of these bans are going into effect. Could you talk about what the White House, what the administration is doing to address the fact that, as you talked about earlier, parts of Black history, parts of American history are being impacted by these book bans in various states?
Sure. No, it's so important. And purely, if some people, we come from a world where we know that even two people equally yoked can see the same thing very differently. Rewriting history is not necessarily one of those things. But if you do see these things philosophically differently, it's important to know, however, that our children, if we're going to compete on a global stage, must at least know their own history. You can't step into a job interview on one of the other continents and the people in that room know more about your history than you do. And I think purely as a matter of competition, not equity and common sense, it's important that children understand, again, the beauty of the greatest democratic nation in the history of the world, but also the challenges that brought us to this point. So I do know this is something that the President and Vice President feel very strongly about, and we'll continue to make sure that we make full access to American history available to all of our children.
Last question.
Thank you, Mayor Benjamin. I'm hoping I could get your reaction, both as one of the president's top advisors and also just a black man living in America, to former President Trump's supporters comparing his mugshot to that of Dr. King, given the anniversary that we're celebrating here in D.C. this week. I don't know if you've seen that, but there have been a lot of posts on social media.
I've not seen that, and I feel better that I haven't seen that. The reality is that the sacrifices made by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and not just him and A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin and Whitney Young and others, ought never be minimized. And because they not only represent the leaders of that past, I sat with Clarence Jones this weekend and Ambassador Andrew Young and heard some of these stories firsthand, but they represent the sacrifices of so many people we don't know. People who labored in anonymity, who gave everything, who marched and cried and died so that this nation might live up to its better angels, might live up to its promise. And I think it's so important that as we look backward, that we work to preserve the importance of that legacy, because it's going to quickly determine how we look forward and determine what America is going to be like, not 60 years ago, but 60 years from now. Thank you all so much.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Come back anytime.
I don't know about that. We'll see.
Please do come back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Please do come back.
60 years. Let's do that.
Not sure the connection, but okay. Chris.
Hi, how are you? The President and the First Lady visited middle school today. Test scores for this age group are the lowest in decades, despite billions of dollars in investments from this administration. Is the White House's approach failing and not improving these test scores?
If anything, look, there's going to be a lot of more work to do, right? That is understandable. That that the work doesn't end. Didn't end when the president was able to open up schools, as I mentioned at the top. Remember, when the president walked in, more than 50% of schools were shut down because of COVID, because the last administration didn't have a plan, didn't have a comprehensive plan to deal with COVID and what it was doing to our economy and what it was doing to our kids. And because the president put schools reopening and businesses reopening and making sure that people got shots in arms, made that a priority, we were able to open up the schools. Now, is there more work to do? Absolutely. As we've seen, the pandemic, COVID has had a devastating effect on our kids. And so, look, the president is committed to making sure that education for all of our children, regardless if you're in rural America or urban America, all across the communities, is a priority, and the students and the kids get what they need. And it's not just education, right? We talked about mental health, right? We talked about kids making sure that they're getting healthy lunches, right? That is something that this administration has provided. And so we've seen the data, we've seen the numbers. What it means to us is that more work needs to be done, and we're committed, and this president and this administration is committed to doing that work. Look, we're going to hear, as I mentioned, Secretary Cardona is going to go on a bus tour. He's going to go across the country as school is opening up. He's going to lay out what the Department of Education is doing to continue to improve our schools, to make sure that students get the education and get the rightfully the education that they deserve. And so the work continues. I don't have a 10-step laid out for you, but I can say for sure that this president is committed, and you see that through the Secretary of Education, and of course, this is something that's incredibly important to the First Lady as well.
Also, a new AP poll asked Americans an open-ended question on their thoughts on the president, and the most common response has to do with his age. how old he is in total president history. Does the White House have additional plans to demonstrate that he can continue to, do the job at his advanced age and kind of allay some of those concerns?
I mean, look, I appreciate the question. I get it often, as you know. What I would say, and I've said this many times, and many of my colleagues have said this, the president says this, if you watch him, if you've seen what he's done the last 2 years, this is a president has had a historic administration in just 2 years. If you look at the more than 13.5 million jobs that he's been able to create, if you look at how he's been able to turn the economy around so that it works for middle-class Americans, if you look at the Inflation Reduction Act and what it's going to do to really help Americans as it relates to healthcare, as it relates to utility bills. If you think about the CHIPS and Science, I mean, this is a president who has taken historic actions, and not just with Democrats on the Hill, but in a bipartisan way. I just mentioned the CHIPS and Science Act, the PACT Act. In many ways, this president has been able to do things that is going to change how American families move forward, whether it is economy, whether it's health care, whether it is trying to make sure that they are able to give to their, do what they can for their family, for their kids. That is important, and so that's what we will happily to discuss as it relates to age, what the president has been able to do and how he's been able to deliver.
And the last question is, the press pool spotted the president walking the Oval Office with his personal physician, Dr. O'Connor, a few minutes ago. Is there an appointment? Did he have a meeting about a health concern?
This is the first time I'm hearing of that. Clearly, I did not see that, so I can't speak to that. I just don't know. Okay.
Thank you, Karine. Good to see you.
Good to see you. It's been a while. Welcome back.
It has, for a lot of us. But good to be here. It still has the new briefing room smell.
Oh, it does, like a new car.
Yeah. In the call he had with the governor of Florida this morning regarding the approaching storm and the shooting in Jacksonville, any chance the president raised his concerns with the governor about the state's new slavery education standards?
So they kept it to what the readout was. Clearly, we always are very careful not to read out private conversation. They talked clearly about the president offering any assistance that the governor might need as we are talking about the Jacksonville shooting, as you all know, and also the storm Idalia that's headed to Florida. That is kind of that is clearly what's on everybody's mind as we see this potential Category 3 storm. And as a community is mourning, I don't have anything else to read out from that call, but clearly those are the two pertinent things at the moment that they were able to discuss. And the president wanted to make sure that that not just the governor, but the people of Florida knew and understood that this is the president, the federal government is with them through the different kind of events that they're dealing with at this time.
And if need be, they'll get back on the phone together.
If need be, absolutely, if need be. And let's not forget the major declaration the president approved within hours, right? As I mentioned, as we are now watching this potential Category 3 hurricane that could hit Florida, which is important.
Two others, if I could. Now that we know that he's officially going to Vietnam, it raises a question we've sort of had throughout the year, and that is, are there still plans to someday soon meet with Chinese President Xi?
Well, I'm just going to go back to what the president said during his press conference at Camp David very recently. He spoke to this. Don't have anything else to add. He has been very clear that he is looking forward to having that discussion at some point. Just don't have anything to share on this.
The White House would like to do that this year?
I'm not going to put a timeline on it, but they've spoken multiple times in the past 2 years or more than 2 years of this president's tenure. I just don't have anything else to share.
And the House Speaker yesterday said moving towards impeachment now is, quote, a natural step forward and would be an opportunity for Congress to get all the information they need, in his words. What is the White House's response to the apparent march to impeachment by House Republicans, and does it make working with him this fall on matters of dollars and cents especially any more difficult?
So look, Ed, I can't really speak to the House Republicans and what they're focusing on. They can speak to that. You've heard from Speaker McCarthy. Not going to dive into what's in his head or what they're thinking or what they want to do on the other side of Pennsylvania. The president is focused on what real Americans care about, the real priorities that Americans care about. I just talked about how the president and the first lady visited a middle school today, and one of the messages that he wanted to make sure that that he highlighted is the importance of every child in America having access to quality education, public education, and also let's not forget what we're celebrating today, 60 years, or commemorating today. That's what the president's going to focus on. Later this week, he's going to focus on lowering healthcare costs, which is something that this administration has worked on the past 2 years. In response to Maui wildfires, you just asked me about his conversation with the governor of Florida and what they're dealing with, a very devastating shooting that we saw in the city of Jacksonville, and this hurricane that's about to potentially hit Florida. Those are the things that the president is going to focus on. Look, and you ask me if how the president's going to work with Speaker McCarthy. Look, this is a president who wants to work in a bipartisan way, and he has been able to do that as it relates to historical pieces of legislation. He wants to continue to do that, and he hopes congressional Republicans would continue to join him on doing that. And that's going to be his focus, instead of more baseless political stunts. That's what they're focusing on.
Some of the frustration appears to be the inability to get information out of the State Department, the Homeland Security Department, other aspects of the government. Is there any validity to those criticisms in the view of the White House, or should the White House be perhaps urging departments to cooperate with ongoing investigations?
Look, we are always, of course, urge the different agencies and departments to work with Congress. Of course, that is something that we always urge, and I can't speak to what they're complaining about. What I can speak to is what the president is focused on, and again, we want to work in a bipartisan way with congressional Republicans. That's what we want to do. We want to get things done for the American people, issues that actually matter to them, not these political stunts that they're clearly focused on. Okay, Mayor.
3 U.S. Marines were killed in this Osprey crash in Australia during a training exercise. Has the president been briefed on any early read or early information about the potential cause of this? Any sense about whether it was, weather-related, mechanical?
So any specifics to what caused it and what was related to it, I would certainly refer you to the Department of Defense for any specific questions. Yesterday, the president extended his condolences to the families of the Marines who lost their lives in this horrific crash, as well as his prayers to those who also suffered injuries. Any additional information on the specifics of the crash or what caused the crash, I would have to refer you to the Department of Defense.
Does the president have any broader concerns that we are seeing, it seems, too many of these aviation incidents, these mishaps in the military? Does he feel there needs to be some sort of a reevaluation or reconsideration of training or focus on maintenance?
Look, the president, of course, when it comes to our military force, he's always going to be concerned. He's always going to want to make sure that they have everything that they need, and of course that they're safe. Anything related to this, I don't want to get ahead of what the Department of Defense might be looking into, what might be causing this. I don't want to get ahead of them, so they would have to answer more specifically on those questions.
One additional question on the House Speaker. He's also said that he's likely to investigate the federal response to the deadly wildfires on Maui, saying he's very concerned about the response. And what do you make of that? And does the White House stand by your response and your efforts in the aftermath of this tragedy? Anything you would do differently?
No, I appreciate the question. A couple of things I want to say. Since the onset of the unprecedented tragedy that we saw in Maui, the president launched a whole of government approach. You've heard me say that. You've heard him say it directly. You also heard the FEMA administrator say this as well, in effort to support the residents who were affected by the communities. Let's not forget, they not only they lost so much. They lost historical land. They lost their community. And also, as soon as the governor in Hawaii, Josh Green, and he has said this himself, requested a major disaster declaration, the president signed it. And you've heard from the governor, you've heard from the two senators who have lifted up and said how quickly this president responded, the federal government responded. So I would just refer you to their own words. Last week, as you all saw, a week ago today, the president, the first lady, they met with survivors, they met with emergency responders and state and local and federal officials. They saw firsthand themselves the overwhelming destruction that caused the wildfires, and it was heartbreaking. And so what I can say here and now, and as the president has said, he is committed to delivering everything that he can to the people of Hawaii, what they need, and we will be with them as long as it takes for them to rebuild. The president has been very clear about that. The First Lady clearly has supported that. The FEMA administrator has said that. I will say this, what is currently on the ground, the federal government has deployed more than 1,000 staff members on the ground, and the FEMA has already given nearly $15 million in assistance to families. And so, again, we will be there, the federal government will be there, certainly at the direction of the president, as long as it takes for this community to rebuild, and certainly our hearts are continue to be with the families and the people in Hawaii who have lost so much. Can't stay on.
Closer to determining what brought down Prigozhin's plane.
So, look, a couple of things on that. I know that folks have had questions on Prigozhin. So we are increasingly confident that Prigozhin died in the plane crash that took place on August 23rd, this past Wednesday. I don't have any new assessment for you on this, so I'll just leave it there.
And secondly, the president said in Tahoe that he had tentatively decided to recommend everyone get the new vaccine. When is he going to decide finally?
So as I think you've heard from the FDA and CDC, they've made an announcement on the new vaccine. So certainly they said that there'll be an updated vaccine mid-September, I believe. So we know that, as you all know, vaccinations against COVID-19 remains the safest protection for avoiding hospitalization, long-term health outcomes, and death, which is why we are going to be encouraging Americans to stay up to date on their vaccines. I would refer you to DHS, as they have, I just mentioned, FDA and CDC mentioned that they'll have the new vaccines by mid-September.
Thanks, Karine. We're about a month away from the government running out of money, potentially shutting down. What's the president's plan to avert a government shutdown?
So look, I'll defer to Congress on the government shutdown. There shouldn't be no reason, right, for Congress to shut down the government. None at all. None. They should fund vital government programs for the American people, and these critical needs we've requested emergency funding for. There should be none. And so that is for Congress to speak to. As you know, senior administration officials, including the OMB Director, Shalonda Young, and our Legislative Affairs Shop, we have had numerous conversations with members of Congress. We'll continue to do that. And we'll continue to engage with them, and we'll continue to underscore the importance of delivering on these bipartisan priorities that was agreed upon, that the American people want to see. And so, look, that is for Congress to answer. There should not be a government shutdown. There shouldn't be.
Does the president support passing a short-term spending bill to keep the government funded, and does he have any plans to speak with the speaker about
So look, again, that's something that I'll defer to Congress on the length of potential continuing resolution. Again, there should be no reason for a government shutdown. I don't have any conversation to read out or to predict for you that the president's going to have with the speaker. As I mentioned, the OMB Director, Shalonda Young, has been in contact with members of Congress. So has his Legislative Affairs Shop. They have continuous conversations about this, underscoring the importance of these vital programs that the American people need. And so they should uphold this bipartisan commitment. That's what the American people want to see.
And then as it relates to COVID vaccine funding, the president said that he had signed off on a proposal internally to present Congress with a request for additional funding. Do you have any additional details about the size of that funding request, what it would be used for, and what would the impact be if Congress does not provide that additional funding on Americans and their ability to get that vaccine?
So I don't have anything new to say or to add to what the president said at this time. What I can say is that we are prepared for the fall. As the CDC and FDA mentioned, that we will have vaccines available by mid-September. We believe we are in the strongest position yet to fight COVID-19. A lot of that is because of this work that this president has done since day one of his administration.
Thank you, Karine. A couple weeks ago, some members of Congress, it was over 50 Republicans and Democrats, They sent a letter to the administration asking for help with H-1B workers and the backlog. In light of concerns about Canada recruiting H-1B holders from the United States, I wanted to ask, does the administration agree with these members of Congress that these workers, these H-1B workers, need more flexibility to do things like change jobs, travel abroad, for example?
So look, as we have said many times before, this is an outdated immigration system. We've asked Congress to update our woefully outdated immigration system. We've been very clear on that, including the temporary visa programs that haven't been updated in more than 2 decades. And so under current regulations, as you know, workers on certain temporary visas usually have 60 days to secure new employment, pursue a different visa classification, or make preparations to depart the United States. So Congress needs to do their job and pass legislation updating our immigration laws to reflect the needs of where we are currently in this 21st century economy. So look, the president, even on his first day, as we've said many times before, he put forth an immigration reform legislation because he took this very seriously. He wanted to make sure that that was part of that was the first piece of legislation that he put forward on his day one, because this is such a broken system.
They're asking specifically, though, for executive action. Is the administration not willing to go that far?
We are saying that Congress needs to do their job. That's what we're saying. This has been 2 decades since this particular visa has been upgraded and updated. And so it's for Congress to act. That's what they need to do.
And can I ask you just briefly, can you talk about Thursday, the Philadelphia trip? What's the plan?
So I don't have anything to share on Thursday. We'll certainly have some more to share in the coming day or two.
On China, there are a lot of different tension points, but one of them we've been reminded of, and that is the fact that China retains ownership of all the pandas at the zoos in the United States, including the Smithsonian National Zoo. And is there any chance the president is going to ask President Xi to let the pandas stay?
I think the panda is supposed to leave at the end of the year. Okay, so I don't have anything new to share, any update to share on the panda's timeline. But as soon as, if we have anything to share, we certainly will share it.
Would the president share the concern of many Americans who love the pandas?
Well, we all love the panda. This is not a conversation I've had with the president. I appreciate the question, Kelly-O.
You didn't see that one coming?
I did not see that one coming. I know my kid loves the pandas, as well as so many other Americans across the country who have visited and seen this panda, but I don't have anything to share. I've missed you. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah? How's baby Karine?
She's good. She
Oh, baby KJP.
very nice to her dad.
Oh, during your
Just
your
like
leave.
adult KJP.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay.
I have another question that you probably were not expecting.
Okay.
Does President Biden want to limit Americans to 2 beers a week?
Where is this coming from? Maybe I didn't miss you so much. Where is this coming from?
All right. Well, Dr. George Koob, who is the director of the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, says the U.S. may soon follow Canada and recommend just 2 beers a week. How do you guys think that's going to go?
Let me tell you what I'm not going to get involved in that question right there. I have no idea. I've not seen the data. I cannot speak to this. I will leave it to the experts and not weigh
So if
in.
the experts say 2 beers a week, that's okay with President Biden?
I will leave it to the experts. I'm just not going to comment on that.
Okay, something else. The Secret Service is paying $16,000 a month now to stage near Hunter Biden in Malibu. Who's paying for that?
That's a question for the Secret Service.
Okay, Hunter Biden is reportedly selling art to pay for his $15,800 a month rent in Malibu. How can you guarantee that people are not going to be buying this art to gain favor with the president?
That is a question for Hunter Biden and his representatives.
It's a
I
question
know.
of
I hear.
ethics at the White House. We know
I
that
hear
one of
your
the art
question.
buyers got a job from the Biden administration. Can you guarantee that there is no quid pro quo?
I hear your question. I'm not going to get involved in this. That is a question for Hunter Biden's representatives.
But we know that from a Hunter Biden associate now that he sold the appearance of access to then Vice President Biden. Are you confident that he has stopped doing that?
That is a question for Hunter Biden. and
If
his
somebody is
representatives.
selling the appearance of access to the White House, that is a question for the White House.
No, that is your I don't know how you're perceiving that.
Sworn testimony by Devin Archer. He said.
I am just not, Peter. I'm just not going to get into this. I'm just not.
So, this testimony, since the last time that I was in here, Devin Archer talks about how he and Hunter Biden tried to profit off the Biden brand. What is the Biden brand?
I'm not going to get into it from here. I'm not going to get into it from here. We're going to move on. Go ahead.
Thanks. I have a question. First of all, happy first day of school.
Happy first day of school.
But seriously, what is the message that the administration has for the millions of girls in Afghanistan who can't go to school because the Taliban won't let them?
So, look, the president has always been very clear about the importance of girls, not just here in America, but globally, being able to live freely and be able to go to school and get the education. And we have been very clear in laying out our concerns, such as girls' education with the Taliban. We have been consistent with that. We have been very clear of that. And so we also remain laser focused on trying to support and assist the Afghan people without bolstering the Taliban. And so that's something that we're going to continue to do. That's something that the president's going to continue to be clear about, not just him, but his administration. And so that doesn't end today and 2 years ago. That certainly will continue throughout his administration.
For the girls themselves, I guess.
Well, look, we have, this is a president, this is an administration that certainly supports girls being educated. Again, not just here, but also in Afghanistan. We are going to make that very clear as we consistently assess our relationship and approach, right, with the Taliban. That is going to continue, and we're going to assist. We're going to assist the Afghan people as much as we can, right, without bolstering the Taliban, and that has been our commitment. Not just the last 2 years, certainly for the past few decades.
Vietnam, the statement you put out doesn't mention human rights or the fact that the chairman is the leader of a socialist communist country that's been backsliding on human rights. Is that going to be part of the conversations?
And you've heard us say this many times. You've heard it from our national security advisor. You've heard it from the president. You've heard it from many members of this administration that this is a president that never shies away on bringing up human rights with any leader. And so I'm not going to get ahead of the agenda. I'm not going to get ahead of a conversation, but certainly this is not something that the president, when it comes to human rights, it's not something that the president shies away from, and he certainly brings that up.
Karine, the president was asked yesterday if he could speak to Governor DeSantis and responded by saying that he'd speak directly to the people of Jacksonville. Did he just mean at the top of his remarks later this afternoon, or is he planning to travel to Jacksonville?
So as the mayor just stated, we're not tracking certainly any travel to Jacksonville. The president, you saw the president's statement. You heard it from me. You heard it from the mayor. Our hearts going out to the people in Jacksonville. Certainly, we're going to do everything that we can. The president spoke to the sheriff. He spoke to the mayor. So just don't have anything else to share beyond that.
On Vietnam, Politico reported that part of what would be announced, and I know you gave kind of a long readout at the top, was a strategic partnership agreement on AI and semiconductors. Are you expecting them to sign that?
So we'll have more to share on that trip, on the agenda, deliverables, what we're expecting the conversation to look like and to be. I just don't want to get ahead of that at this time.
Last one, while we're gone, there's a report that you guys were considering a meeting with MBS around the G20. They'll obviously be attending, I think, for the first time as sort of the head of state designate. And it comes as energy prices have been high this summer and headed into next summer where there's a lot of anticipation that they could remain there. So I'm wondering if that's something that's actively in the works or...
So I don't have anything to share on any bilateral meetings that the president might have on at the G20. If we were to have any, certainly we will lay that out for all of you or announce that to all of you.
Any sort of top line stuff about what you're hoping to accomplish at the G20?
The G20 more broadly. So he's going to reaffirm, the president will reaffirm the U.S. commitment to the G20 as the premier forum of economic cooperation globally. He'll discuss a range of joint efforts to tackle global issues, from the clean energy transition and combating climate change to mitigating the economic and social impacts of Russia's war in Ukraine. Obviously, that will be a big part of the conversation, to increasing the capacity of the multilateral development banks, including the World Bank, to better fight poverty and take on the significant transnational challenges that are afflicting countries across the world. So we have a packed agenda, as you can imagine, and we'll have more to share in the coming days. And again, any bilateral or meetings that could potentially happen around the G20, we certainly will share that with all of you.
Thanks, Karine. I wanted to get your response to some comments from Senator Sanders over the weekend. He said the president has every right to be proud of his record, but he seemed to suggest that the president should spend less time touting his record and Bidenomics and more time speaking to the anxieties of Americans who are still struggling in the current economy. He said Democrats up and down the line are going to have to be much clearer to the American people as to what they stand for. I wonder if you have any reaction to that.
So look, first, we're very thankful to Senator Sanders for certainly being partners with us in passing some of the key pillars of Bidenomics, right? When you think about the key pieces of legislation, historical pieces of legislation that had led to unemployment being under 4%, when it led to millions of jobs being created, when it leads to middle class really rebuilding that middle class, not leaving anyone behind. Certainly, Senator Sanders has been a key partner, and we really appreciate the efforts that his leadership, I should say, in Congress in making that happen. And so, look, we agree with the senator, right? When it comes to what we're doing is just the beginning, right? This is part of trying to make sure that we do build a middle class, that we build an economy from the bottom up, middle out. That is incredibly important to this president. That's why he has said that the last 2 years. It's not just the last 2 years. He doesn't believe in trickle-down economics. He knows that doesn't work. And so when it comes to the president going out there and talking to the American people directly to let them know what this administration has been able to do with the help of senators like Sanders, I think it's important. We think it's important for them to hear directly from this administration. And so, look, we think there's more work to do. We're going to hear from this president this week about how he's going to continue to lower costs, right? Lower healthcare costs for Americans, something that the president, has been leading on, and his administration has continuously put out ways to do that. Inflation Reduction Act, how it's going to be able to help Americans lower costs, healthcare costs, how it's going to be able to make sure seniors are not paying more than $35 on insulin. All of those things are key. They're critical. They're important. And so the work continues. The work continues. And so we agree with the senator. Yes, the work continues. And hopefully we can continue to work together with him on getting that done, getting more done for the American people and American families. Okay, Karen.
To go back to the president's comments from Friday about the COVID funding request, when he said he was asking, or he signed off on a proposal to present to Congress a request for additional funding for a new vaccine, why was that not included in the $40 billion supplemental funding request to Congress that was sent out this month?
I don't have anything else to share on the president's comments at this time, so I want to be very clear just don't have anything else more to add. What I can say is that we are prepared for the fall. We believe that we're prepared for the fall. We believe that we're in a better position than we've ever been to combat COVID-19. And that's because of the work that the president has done. You heard from FDA, you heard from CDC, who have said that there's going to be new vaccine that's going to be available mid-September. And look, because of the work that this administration has done with the leadership of this president, we have been able to put together a comprehensive way to deal with this pandemic, to deal with COVID-19. And we have put forth multiple tools to do that. And the vaccine clearly is one of that. As it relates to what the president said, I just don't have anything to add at this time.
On that new vaccine that's going to be available in mid-September, the CDC data says that only 56 million Americans, 17% of the population, received the updated shot last year. What type of public messaging campaign or effort will the administration and the White House be doing starting in mid-September to get people to get that shot, to get more people than last year to get that shot?
As you know, Karen, this is an issue that you have followed very closely for the past 2 years, and you have known that this administration, when it comes to informing the American people about these vaccines, about the different tools that this president and this administration has put forward, we have really put informing Americans as a priority. And so we'll continue to do that. We know that COVID-19 vaccinations are the safest protection for avoiding hospitalization, long-term health outcomes, and death. And that is why we are going to continue to encourage Americans to stay up to date on their vaccines. And so you'll hear more from us on that. And as you know, that is something when it comes to informing Americans, American families about about the vaccine. We certainly have been really something that we put at the forefront as we move forward with our comprehensive approach to dealing with this pandemic. I would also refer you to the HHS on anything more specifics on this new vaccine. Go ahead, Nari.
Thank you. Question on foreign policy. Israel Foreign Minister revealed that he met with his Libyan counterpart, which led to her firing and demonstrations in protest. Does this complicate the administration efforts in expanding on the Abraham Accords and kill any chance of normalization now between Israel and Libya? It was reported that the administration is angry at the Israeli leak of the story.
So on that particular question, I would have to refer you to the Libyan Government of National Unity and the Government of Israel. That's where I would have to refer you on that particular question. I just don't have anything else to share on that.
Mr. Brown went to Libya and he met with the Prime Minister, and he encouraged him apparently to approach Israel for this potential relationship. So the administration has an interest in this.
No, I understand the question. On any conversation or meeting, I would have to refer you to the respective governments.
Given what you've said so far about the president's preparing for COVID and being ready for any sort of fall surge, and what the president said today at the middle school, does the administration believe that all of the resources are in place, that they're adequate, should there be a case uptick that maybe is concerning to some districts and they maybe consider whether or not to leave kids in the classroom?
So a couple of things. I've talked about the historic progress that our administration has made in the ability to manage COVID-19, so that it's no longer a meaningful disruption to the way that we move in our day-to-day life, right? So that is something that the president has taken seriously. We believe we are in the strongest position yet to deal with COVID-19, as I've said multiple times at this point. Anything that we might see in the fall or in the winter. And that's because safe and updated vaccines that will be available in mid-September, widely available at-home COVID tests, right? I talked about the different tools that this administration has been able to put forward, widely available effective treatments, which can reduce the risk of severe illness, hospitalization, and death. And we are also going to encourage Americans to get their updated COVID-19 vaccine in addition to their annual flu shot. Let's not forget that is important for Americans to get, and an RSV immunization for people over 60 and for infants. That is something that we're going to continue to make very clear to Americans across the country. As it relates to any uptick nationally, while the CDC is reporting an increase in infections and hospital admissions overall remains low. But again, we believe that we are in a good position, in the strongest position that we have been in the past 3 years or so to deal with COVID-19. There's going to be an updated vaccine in mid-September. We're going to continue to encourage Americans to get their updated vaccine, to stay updated on their vaccines more broadly, but also to make sure they get the RSV and also to make sure that they're getting the flu shot.
I guess specifically, though, is there a message to school districts? As kids are back in school now, and, you know, it's not just COVID. As you mentioned, there are a lot of things that can make kids, sick this time of year.
I mean, that's why I mentioned the RSV. That's why I mentioned the flu, right? All of those things are important for Americans to stay updated on. So as kids returns to school, to your point, CDC continues to recommend that people are up to date, again, on their COVID-19 vaccines. The agency has also laid out a number of steps people can take to keep themselves and their loved ones safe. If folks go to cdc.gov, it's important. If Americans or their families across the country have any concerns, any questions, they should go to cdc.gov, and they'll lay out ways to protect their loved ones, to protect their kids. Decisions is at the district level, as you all know, when it comes to any decisions on what tools they're going to use, whether it's masking or whatever, however they're going to move forward. That is something that's decided on a local level. But again, the CDC has laid out ways for for schools and families to move forward if they have concerns. But again, we are encouraging. We are going to continue to encourage folks to be updated on their vaccine, the RSV. Let's not forget, make sure they get that, and also the flu vaccine. All of those things are incredibly important as we head into the fall and winter months to keep our loved ones safe.
Thanks, Karine. So on oil, the administration is engaging now with dictator Nicolas Maduro to increase oil production. Why not, through regulation, show encouragement here in the U.S. for oil production?
So a couple of things. So the U.S. is going to continue to work to support the restoration of democracy and the rule of law in Venezuela. That is something that we're going to continue to do, and has been our longstanding position. Should Venezuela take concrete actions toward restoring democracy, leading to free and fair elections, we are prepared to provide corresponding sanctions relief as well. At this time, Venezuela has not taken the necessary steps, and our sanctions remain in effect, so nothing has changed there.
So new leases were issued for the Gulf of Mexico for drilling, yet in that they removed 6 million acres of land to do that. Plus, there were additional restrictions placed on ships, specifically for oil and natural gas, to deliver those products. Why continue to constrict the U.S. energy industry?
Meaning in Venezuela specifically?
No, I'm talking about Gulf of Mexico. Now I'm talking about oil. Second question about.
Okay.
So there was new leases were offered for the Gulf of Mexico, but in those new leases, the administration has reduced the amount of acreage by 6 million acres to do that. And in addition, they restricted ships taking the oil from the rigs and natural gas from the rigs to the shore. So again, why continue to add restrictions on that industry?
So we don't believe we add restrictions on that industry. I want to look specifically on what you lay out those restrictions were and what was provided on the Gulf of Mexico. So I want to get back to my team and make sure that what you laid out is exactly how it was announced, and we'll get back to you on that particular questions. But that is not something that we believe that we are doing.
One more on UAW. Is the president going to get involved? Has he been talking with UAW at all?
Well, you heard from the president yesterday. He spoke to this when he was asked about the UAW. Clearly, he has been. This is a president that believes in investing in America, has ensured, right, when it comes to the future of automaking, it will be built here in America and by American workers. He's been very clear about this. This is a president that has overseen historic increases in labor union participation during his time in office, and unions themselves have labeled him, as you hear us say this all the time, the most pro-union president. And so, look, we're not going to read out every conversation that this president has with parties in these negotiations, but the White House remains in close touch, as we have been in many of these other discussions with the UAW and the big three automakers. Look, the president believes in collective bargaining, as you hear him and you hear us say all the time, and it has worked. We've seen it worked in the past 2 years. Okay. Oh, yeah, we have to gather for the next event. We'll see you tomorrow, guys. Thank you, everybody.